Okay, can you state your name, Dr. Pheko, for the camera?
Motsoko Pheko.
And where were you born?
Matatiele, Eastern Cape, South Africa.
Okay, and what was the original name of South Africa?
The original name of South Africa was Izwe Labantu Abamnyama, and of course Azania simply means Izwe Labamnyama, Lefatshe la Batho ba Batsho. And then of course also Azania means whom God, he whom God hears. That's one of the names. That's one of the names.
Okay, great. So can you, how do you define Pan-Africanism?
I define Pan-Africanism simply as a philosophical a philosophy that says that Africa belongs to the African people, and that the wealth of Africa must be for the benefit of the African people. And then of course it also has the element of unity. That without this philosophy, everyone doing his own thing there or her own thing there, we're never going to get anywhere. I mean, history shows us that people who work against us are always united against us. But we are the only people who, when the fight comes, we fight separately. And, you know, you go to South Africa, the wars of national resistance began in the Eastern Cape, and there were Zulus, Natal sitting there. When they were through with the Xhosas, they went to KwaZulu-Natal, etc., etc. So it is very, very clear that we have to work together. Okay.
So you talked a little bit about why Pan-Africanism is important. Can you describe what Pan-Africanism would look like?
Pan-Africanism would look like where everybody has a share, where everybody owns something. Because in pre-colonial Africa, everybody owned something, including land. And in fact, our rich people, our so-called capitalists today, their capitalism did not work the way the European capital works. A rich man would look around and say, okay, there's a widow over there, there is somebody who is suffering there, and maybe give him about 8 cattle, among which there will be maybe about 3 cows to go and milk. And these cows could be there for something like 10, 20 years. And then one day, of course, he'll come and fetch them. And when he comes to fetch these cattle, he leaves the ones that says thank you. And that's how people were being empowered. And these are the things that are no longer being done today. So our rich people were not exploiting. Our rich people were using their wealth, a wealth to serve people.
Okay. So how will Pan-Africanism benefit African people in the diaspora?
It would benefit them in the sense that if they want to come home, they can come home, and also that where the jobs are there, they come up there, and I think that we see a little example of this with regard to Ghana, where W.E.B. Du Bois was given the responsibility of writing an Africa encyclopedia, and which actually benefited, of course, Africa, but I suppose all Africans, because certainly that Encyclopedia Africana was not meant only for Africans. You had George Patmore there, who was an advisor to Nkrumah on Pan-African affairs. And I've always said that, you know, people here, whether they understand it or they don't understand it, they have had better opportunities of education. So they have a lot of knowledge that the continent needs from them. And if with a proper Pan-African leadership, we would cease to go and recruit engineers from Germany, from France, and recruit people, the skilled people that we want in the diaspora, knowing that these are the people who are who share this vision, who want Africa to prosper. But people we employ from Europe, not many of them really want the project to succeed. I know of people who have gone there to work on a project, and all of a sudden you hear that after they were paid, they disappeared. And they are in Australia, they are in New Zealand, and they know that they cannot be, be brought back to the country.
Okay, so earlier today you talked a little bit about land being powerful and land being sort of the key to controlling land and resources being the key to Africa's economic independence. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the impact of land as well as economic resources and why we need to achieve economic independence?
The resources are in the land. The resources are in the land. I'm not going to talk about sovereignty itself because you cannot have sovereignty if you don't have land. But the resources are in the land. Food is in the land. Water is in the land. Houses are in the land. Of course, the diamonds are in the land. So there's hardly anything that is not in the land. Even cellulose, that the material that made cell phones comes from the land. There's hardly anything. When you talk about raw materials, there's no raw material that you're going to find in the sky or in the air. All is in the land. And that is why land becomes such an important thing. And, I think that's it in a nutshell.
So why is economic independence important?
Economic independence is very important because you don't want to go about begging. When you don't have economic independence, you don't control the resources, you're just a beggar. You can see how much of our governments have been coming to the United States for aid, which was not aid. I thought it was aid, and I thought these people are very charitable. Maybe they are beginning to give us back what they took from us, only to be told aid is nothing but a debt. They are putting you into debt, and people are taking a lot of interest on that. And how are they ever going to get the opportunity to develop when they are busy paying the debt? Schools are not going to be there. Hospitals are not going to be there. The infrastructure of the country, the roads, everything is just going to suffer. And that has been the case in Africa until now. People realize that aid is not the right way. We don't need aid, really, seriously speaking. That's why I am very passionate about the question of technology, acquisition of technology, because I'm saying with technology, we can process these things, sell them much better for a higher price than we sell them. And in that way, why would we be poor when we can process the gold, the mine, the diamonds, the cocoa, the tea, right there in Africa, and sell it as a finished product and get more money for it. But they come to us and get it for nothing and bring it back and put us into debt for something that they got from us.
Okay. I have just a couple more questions. The sort of third to last question is, we see currently that imperialist aggression is negatively affecting Libya. Could you talk a little bit about your position on what's going on in Libya and how it will positively or negatively affect African people at home and abroad?
First of all, let me start about how it is going to affect negatively the continent, because certainly with what is being done there, Libya is going to go back 20 years. It's going to be destroyed. I mean, what I've watched on television is very bad. So that country is not going to be the same after this, whether they let the puppets come in or whether Gaddafi continues, but that country is certainly gone back 20 years back. Now, when Libya, a country that we had the resources, most of them, perhaps one would say, being used in Africa, in the development of Africa, those resources are not going to be available for Africa. So definitely, that war is going to affect not only Africa, not only Libya, but Africa itself. The other question was what? Sorry?
The other question is, what's your position on the NATO's bombing and war with Libya?
It's just very terrible, and I think that it shows that they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in democracy. And while there's oil there, the whole thing has nothing to do with Gaddafi killing civilians. If there's anything like that, if he has done anything like that, it has nothing to do with that. What is happening in Africa and what has happened in the past, number one, we know that as soon as a country is about to be independent, they look at us and say, these are radicals, these are moderates. They go for moderates because moderates are going to betray the struggle, and they have betrayed the struggle in several places. It is the same thing when these leaders are in power, like Gaddafi was there. But ever since Gaddafi may have committed one thing, he controlled the oil for the benefit of the people, even in fact for the benefit of Africa. We know that Nkrumah was gone. Why? Because they didn't like what he was doing. Lumumba was gone. Why? They did not. Sankara, Thomas Sankara was gone. Mugabe, they don't want him. So in Africa, in fact, we don't have democracy now, because when elections come, the imperialists get there, they give money to the parties they prefer, and it is always the so-called moderate parties. And we have a history here of how, for instance, Western powers, if I can call them that, dealt with the PAC and the ANC, and they clearly said why they were not going to negotiate with the PAC, and that the PAC must be destroyed.
Okay. So with two more questions. The second to last is, can you talk a little bit about, you talked about not being beggars and dependent on Western or foreign institutions like the International Monetary Fund and these other countries like Britain, the U.S., et cetera, et cetera. What is your suggestion for slowly or radically sort of taking Africa off of that dependence, like making us independent economically? Like, what's the next step? What do we have to do to get to economic independence?
To get to economic independence, as far as I'm concerned, we need skills. We have the cake. We don't know how to cut the cake. The cake is there. We don't know how to cut it because we don't have knowledge. We can't process cocoa. We can't process coffee. We can't process the diamonds, and I suppose even the oil. And then our system of education must also change. They don't have oil in Britain. And of course, you can go to Cambridge and go to Oxford, but they're not going to train you there. So we need the type of education that is tailored to the needs of Africa. We know we have oil, and it's amazing to me that our institutions of learning don't teach anything about oil. So I'm saying, here is the cake. We need the tools to be able to cut it. And that is technology, that is knowledge, that is skills. You can't develop a country without human development. Human development is the beginning and the thing of developing a country.
Okay, and then one last question, and then you can sort of do a wrap up. What role do you think organizations like the PAC, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APSP, PANAFU have with achieving Pan-Africanism? And how do you think that we can achieve Pan-Africanism faster?
Well, I think that we must look back again here and what has been done, because certainly Pan-Africanism was achieved in the past. I believe that it was achieved. It would not have delivered political freedom if it had not been achieved. It was achieved, but then it has had its reverses. But I think one of the most important things is information. We are not connected as the pioneers of Pan-Africanism were. Like now, we've just met here because it's May 25. Maybe we'll be meeting again 10 years later, or maybe next year if we're lucky, and so on. So we're not connected. We don't know what each person was doing. But if you look at the Pan-Africanist pioneers, they knew exactly what each person was doing. And they knew exactly what Pan-Africanism was about. And I was saying the other day, some people talk about United States of Africa under socialist, a scientific socialism. And I'm saying, you need to boil this thing down. What do you mean by scientific socialism? Somebody comes and says, it'll have to be Africanist socialist democracy. I'm sure it means the same thing. But some of these things are big terms. And then sometimes people get married to a terminology. They like the terminology. They feel that if you dismiss their terminology, you're dismissing them. But I really think that we should still with content. What do we mean? Boil this thing down. Like now in South Africa, we talked about land, isolatu. And I think that also we thought that people understood it. They understood it as a battle cry. But I don't think that they understood it as a property that would serve them, like now, where do you build your house and so on. So we began to realize that you have to bring this thing to the level of the masses. And another thing that is lacking, I think, is education. I don't think that the young people understand Pan-Africanism the way we understood it. There's lack of education. And if you look at Nkrumah went to the extent of building a school, a student in the institute. And yet, already there was a lot of books that were being read those days. And I think that we need to... When I was in Britain and I met some of the A-APRP people, they had very good literature. And then they seem to have a program of getting people through, okay, now you're a member and you're a cadre. So these things... people had to read, you're a member. When you're a member, you don't really know much. But once you begin to develop as a cadre, you begin to know more. And then it is from the cadres that we must elect leaders. Because there's a tendency now that anybody comes, he wants to go to parliament, he's rough from school, he's ignorant, but well, because he can whip a little bit of support, maybe he will succeed. But he is not even a Pan-Africanist. So as Africa, we must also be sure that when we talk about a Pan-African program, it is being driven by Pan-Africanists.
Okay, and any last minute comment you'd like to make?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to say?
Now, the last comment I would like to make is more or less a repetition that we need to have a national agenda. We need to know exactly what it is we want to achieve. We must be very, very clear. And I think that Africa and the diaspora must begin to work a little bit together. But this again will depend on the governments. But I believe that now that the societies have been recognized as part of the 6th region of the diaspora, they have a good opportunity to go and make sure that they can shape things in this direction, because people will talk, but they will not mean what they're saying.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pheko.
You're welcome indeed.
Thank you, sir.